I would like you to explain the difference between a Turing machine, a universal Turing machine, and then a quantum Turing machine, and a constructor and a universal constructor. So please.
Yeah, so this is a great question because it goes, let's say, at the heart of the matter. So a Turing machine is a programmable machine so it's an entity which has you can program to do a number of tasks or transformations, and these transformations are computations. So they are a particular kind of transformations that involve, if you like, information variables. And a classical Turing machine is a Turing machine that operates according to the laws of physics that, if you like, Newton discovered.
Sure.
Albeit a discretized version of those laws, but let's say, it runs on that kind of physics. Therefore, does not have all the new and very interesting effects that quantum theory led us to discover about a century ago when it was proposed. A quantum Turing machine is a programmable computer, is a programmable machine that can perform computations that obeys the laws of quantum theory. So instead of having the laws of Newton or a discretized version of those, we have quantum theory, which is, by the way, one of the best available explanations of the universe. And I think David told me an anecdote which was quite fun at some point, where telling me about how he thought about this universal quantum computer idea initially, was that he was discussing with someone, and I think it occurred to him that somehow the laws of the laws of a standard Turing machine, a classical Turing machine, were running on the wrong physics in a sense, because they were using an obsolete type of physics, right? Newton's laws, if you like. Whereas somehow computer scientists should have looked into something that ran on the actual laws of physics that are updated now, and they obey the sort of scheme of quantum theory. So somehow the idea was to upgrade the idea of a classical Turing machine with the right laws of physics, with the laws of physics that we know superseded Newton's laws at the beginning of the last century. Now, a universal Turing machine is a computer, so a programmable machine that can perform computations, that's capable of performing all physically allowed computations. So not just one computation or two or whatever, but if you consider the set of all physically possible computations under a given law of physics, the universal Turing machine in that specific physics is capable of performing all of them. So, for example, you can think of a computation being, an addition. You can think of addition and multiplication. These are, two possible computations.
Mm-hmm.
You can imagine two specific entities, one that can add things, and another computer that can only multiply. Now, a universal, like a more universal machine than either of those, is one that is a computer that can be programmed to perform either multiplication or addition. And now, if you consider all the possible computations, a universal computer is one that can be programmed to perform all of these computations put together. So it's like a multi-functional entity. And so provided that you give it the right program, it will perform the right computation.
Sorry to interrupt, but the computer that someone is listening to this on, their iPhone or their desktop, is that a universal computer?
Yes, so that's a universal, it's an approximation of a universal classical Turing machine, yes. So I think that's what Turing gave us with his ideas was basically the model, the theory, let's say, that powered all of the information technology that we currently use. And the idea is that the quantum universal Turing machine will upgrade these machines when the universal quantum computer comes about, in ways that they can perform new algorithms that are based on quantum laws rather than the classical laws of physics. And now constructors are simply, so if you are happy with this idea of programming something to perform a computation, which is what Turing machines are about, constructors bring this concept a level up, in the sense that instead of just having computations as the transformations that you're considering in the repertoire of your machine, you have any physical transformation that is conceivable. So in the case of, so a constructor is a programmable machine that can perform a given task. The task can be a computation. So computers, Turing machines are special cases of constructors, but constructors can be more general. And typically examples of constructors are things like catalysts, computers, as I said, heat engines, 3D printers, all sorts of machines that can be programmed to perform a transformation, a physical transformation, and also have the ability that they can perform it and stay unchanged in the capacity of performing the transformation again. This is very important. This is true for computers too. They are special cases for constructors because they perform a computation and then you want them to be able to do it over and over again. And I think the ideal Turing machine should be able to do this indefinitely. Likewise, constructors have this feature of being able to perform a task and then repeat this over and over again if given the right input. And so again, programmable constructors are those that can be programmed to perform given tasks. And then a universal constructor is a constructor that has all of the possible tasks in its repertoire. So you can program it to perform any task that is physically allowed. And there can be a quantum programmable constructor and the quantum universal constructor, and possibly a universal constructor that runs on better laws of physics than those we currently know. So maybe post-quantum constructors. And but so the idea is always the same. Different laws of physics give you different sets of tasks that can be performed, just like different laws of physics give you different computations being performable by a Turing machine.
As someone immersed in the exploration of physics, consciousness, and math, I recognize the importance of supporting my body and my mind. This journey of discovery led me to a remarkable find, Mosh Bars. Mosh is a venture by Maria Shriver and Patrick Schwarzenegger and is at the forefront of blending nutrition with a mission to foster brain health awareness. With 6 mouth-watering flavors, there's a taste for just about every palate, even a selection of plant-based options for those preferring vegan nutrition. Personally, I found the chocolate sea salt flavor to be a delightful addition to my day, post-workout especially. In fact, I recorded myself biting into a bar for the first time.
How's the flavor?
It's great. That was real. If you want to find ways to give back to others and fuel your body and your brain at the same time, Mosh Bars are a great choice for you. Head to moshlife.com/toe to save 20% off plus free shipping on either the Bestsellers trial pack or the new plant-based trial pack. That's 20% off plus free shipping on either the Bestsellers or plant-based trial pack at moshlife.com/TOE. Thank you to Mosh for sponsoring this video.
And so the von Neumann's idea was really to extend the scheme of Turing's to other tasks that are not just computations. So thermodynamics transformations are an example, chemical reactions are another example. And von Neumann specifically was concerned about emulating life. And so he noticed that the reason why he thought of this constructor idea was that he noticed that in the Turing machine's model, there was a gap in the sense that you are not, it's impossible to program a Turing machine, a universal Turing machine, whether it's quantum, classical, or whatever, to self-replicate. So you can program a computer to simulate a self-reproducing cell, but if you wanted to program your own computer to create a replica of itself, which would be very convenient, out of raw materials, that can't be done. Reason is that simply the scheme of Turing's doesn't accommodate for this kind of stuff. It only accommodates for computations to be performed on a tape and doesn't have things like arms and things that can be assemble things and so on.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to get out of the scheme of Turing's machines. You have to sort of think of something more general. And that's where von Neumann landed on the idea of the universal constructor.
Okay, great. So how does one make a difference between what's extremely unlikely and what's impossible? So it's my understanding from what you've just said and from the papers I've read is that the traditional way of doing physics is that you have some initial data set and you evolve it forward. That's like the dynamics. And the constructor way of looking at it is, okay, well, actually, let me go back. What you can do is then look at these laws as some causes that produce some effect. And one of those effects may be that entropy tends to increase. Okay, so in other words, you can derive thermodynamics from statistical mechanics. So it seems like constructor theory is working backward by looking at the effects and then stating those as laws rather than deriving them. So when I hear you say, look, entropy doesn't, or the heat engine, entropy doesn't increase, but well, entropy is not likely to increase. So at what point do we make a cutoff between the likeliness and saying that something's impossible?
Yeah, that's a great question. So let's first consider the fact that when you say that something is possible or impossible, you're not directly referring to likelihood or probabilities for it to happen. So somehow probabilities are not there in the foundations of constructor theory, and they come as, say, derivative statements, approximate things, but somehow they're not necessarily built. In fact, they're not built at all in the foundations of the theory. And this is a plus in a sense. So when you say that something is, a task is impossible, what you mean is that there is a law that forbids the fact that this transformation, these physical transformations that's referred to by the task, is brought about to arbitrarily high accuracy by a constructor. So by this device that can operate in a cycle by returning the substrate that you gave to the constructor in the right input state in the correct output state. And so if the laws of physics say there is some fundamental limit beyond which we can't go as far as this transformation is concerned, meaning there cannot be a full cycle that can operate this transformation and then return itself to the original state of affairs, just like a catalyst would do, that's the case when the task is impossible. A very simple example is the task of changing the energy of a substrate. So if you want to change the energy of a battery, for example, so from low to high, you can't do it with a constructor without any other side effects, because the constructor will have to give up some energy because of conservation of energy. It would give up some energy to the battery.
Yes.
Thereby not being able to return itself to the original state of being able to perform the task again to the same, degree of accuracy. So that's an example of a transformation that's actually possible in the sense that it can happen, it can occur under laws of physics, because obviously we can use another source of energy to replenish the battery once it's on low. However, this other source will have to be depleted itself, so it cannot be a constructor. So now if you're looking for a constructor that can give you energy without depleting itself, you will have to go to a physics where conservation of energy isn't true. And so it's not the kind of physics that we believe describes our universe.
If you enjoyed this TOE clipping, then the full video is linked in the description. You should also sign up for TOE Mail, which is again in the description and the pinned comment. You'll receive immediate access to all exclusive updates from the Theories of Everything podcast. It also helps me communicate directly with the core TOE community. You'll also receive my top 10 TOEs. Think of it as the intellectual version of Quentin Tarantino's Obsession.